to take a vote on the bill, we want to duck the question. We are compensated to cast votes and explain our votes to the American people. By refusing to let this bill come to the floor today, the majority is abrogating its responsibility to the country. We should oppose this rule.
This time has expired. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from North Carolina, Dr. Fox.
Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague from South Carolina for handling the rule and for yielding 2 minutes. And I want to say, first off, that we should all vote for this rule, and we should vote for the resolution that's going to come up later. I want to point out to my colleagues again that you are entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to rewrite history. The House passed a bill last week, a bipartisan bill. There's been so much touting of the Senate bipartisan bill, but not one mention of the fact that by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle that we passed a bipartisan bill last week which did exactly what the President, Mrs. Pelosi, Mr. Hoyer, all those in charge of the Democrat Party said they wanted, a one-year extension of the policy that was passed last year. It also stopped raises for Congress and federal employees and cut spending. What our colleagues on the other side of the aisle cannot do, and what the President seems incapable of doing, is cutting federal spending, which is desperately what we need in this country. And I want to point out to my colleague from New York who says that we're doing nothing here today. We're not doing anything, I believe, is her comment. I want to point out that the Constitution in Article 1, Section 1, devises the Congress of the United States, and then Section 2 it talks about the House of Representatives. Well, if the founders thought the House was irrelevant, and obviously my colleague thinks that the House is irrelevant, then maybe some people should go home. I don't think the House is irrelevant. Mr. Reid has said the House of Representatives must pass their bill. Well, nobody made Mr. Reid the king, and I don't think that we have to do what Mr. Reid says. He has a very high opinion of himself. I think we do what the Constitution tells us to do. When there's a difference of opinion, then we go to conference. A no vote to our colleagues means they don't want to follow regular order and want to continue the uncertainty. What has the Senate done this year? The Senate has passed approximately 10 substantive bills. It's my opinion that the Senate is out of touch. A 2-month bill is not appropriate. They want to, instead of being in Alice in Wonderland, like my colleague said last night, we're in 1984. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the Senate or its members. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Colorado, a member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, Ms. DeGette.
Gentlelady from Colorado is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I'm mad too. I'm mad at the Senate. I'm mad this is a short-term extension. I'm mad that this allows this pipeline that I object to be built. And I too am mad at the way it's paid for. But then, Mr. Speaker, I think about the 6 constituents that I met with a couple of weeks ago in Denver. All 6 of them are unemployed and have been for over 2 years. Every morning, these 6 folks wake up with hope. They send out resumes. They make phone calls. They visit offices. They do everything they can think of to get a job. By the end of the day, they're dispirited. By the end of the week, on Sunday, now we want to remove all hope that they will have to subsist in any way. This is going to happen in 12 days. There's almost 36,000 people like this in my district. There's 2.2 million of them around the country. Or I think about the hundreds of thousands of families who do have jobs. Now, these folks, as of January 1st, are all going to lose $1,000 in their paychecks in 12 days. These people have planned their Christmas budgets around that money. Now, either they'll have to charge it on their credit cards, racking up more debt, or maybe they just won't buy those toys to put under the tree because of Congress. Merry Christmas. Don't fool yourselves. I've been in Congress 15 years now. The Senate is not coming back. There won't be a conference committee. This motion effectively kills the bill. Let's stop arguing about process. Let's stop arguing about what we want to see. Let's stop demagoguing this issue. Let's start talking for once about the people that we represent and who will lose hope this holiday season because of us. Let's defeat this motion. Let's adopt the bipartisan Senate bill. Let's come back in January and work together in a bipartisan and a bicameral way to actually fix this bill. I yield back.
The lady's time has expired. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Georgia, my cousin Austin Scott.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this issue. And you know, I, as most Americans, love this time of year. It's Christmas, a time where we celebrate the birth of Christ and spend time with our family and friends and at church. And I sent a quick message to my wife last night, and I said, honey, I may be here a while. And she said, we have 5 days until Christmas. Stay in the fight. Americans need you. Now, I know a lot of people on the other side of the aisle want to use that as an excuse to go home, but America needs us to be up here and work. Now, a lot's been said today, but the fact is simple. The Senate put a bad amendment on a good bill, a bill that passed this House with almost as many Democrats voting for it as Republicans who voted against it. A bipartisan bill that does what the President asked us to do, which is to extend the payroll tax cut for 12 months. 12 months is what the President asked for. 12 months is what we did. Now, the Senate, in their haste to get out of town, passed it for 60 days. Now, I would respectfully submit that if they had done any consideration at all, they would have made it at least 90 days. And I'm one of those who signed a quarterly wage and tax return, like many of my freshman colleagues. And I, again, want to ask the President to stand with the Republican House. Let's pass this tax cut for a year and do what Americans need us to do.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 90 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I love Christmas too, but when the gentleman on the other side of the aisle suggests that somehow they're going to stay around here after today, I don't believe that for 1 minute. I guarantee you that at the end of the day, the Republicans are going to go home. The difference is they're going to go home without having passed a Senate bill that allows people to get their payroll tax cut, their unemployment insurance, and the seniors to go out and be able to access Medicare. If you really cared about these issues, then you would pass the Senate bill. You wouldn't put up a vote that rejects the Senate bill and doesn't allow us to consider it at all. Don't kid anybody here. At the end of the day, the Republicans are going to go home. But the consequence for the American people is that the economy is in a very perilous situation right now. If you take this tax cut and you don't extend it, then it's very possible that people won't have money to spend, the economy won't grow, and this teetering economy could easily fall back into a recession again. So I don't know what's going on here. All I can think of is that the Tea Party Republicans, the extremists on the Republican side, are wagging the Republican dog and saying to your leadership, we don't want to do this. They don't want the payroll tax extension. They don't want the unemployment extension. I don't know why they don't care about the American people, but that's the bottom line here. You're going to go home at the end of the day. There isn't going to be any bill passed here, and the deadline is going to be reached on January 1st, and people are going to be without their unemployment insurance, and they're going to have a tax increase. That's what the consequence of this. And I've been hearing the Republicans for years saying they don't want a tax increase. Well, they don't care if the tax increase is on the middle class. If it's on the wealthy, oh, they don't want that. But it's okay to increase taxes on the middle class.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tom Reed.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this rule and the underlying legislation. Why? Because enough is enough. The arrogance of this place is outstanding. It's unbelievable. You have to look at what we're talking about from the eyes of our constituents and the people back home. 2 months of certainty for people when it comes to their payroll, to their paychecks. 2 months for how our doctors are going to get paid for caring for our sick and our old. That's ridiculous. I'll tell my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, there's a new dawn that has emerged in this chamber. We are no longer going to run from our responsibility to govern. We are going to do it in the open, we're going to do it honestly, and we're going to do it in a way that provides certainty to these problems, because God knows we can no longer afford Band-Aids. We need real solutions, long-term solutions. I plead with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join us and reach a resolution to these that brings certainty for a longer period of time than 2 months. With that, I yield the balance of my
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to yield a minute and a half to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, we are here basically because the Joker has taken control of the Congress. Everyone knows that this is a procedural calamity that will not work. The House bill was dead on arrival in the other body because it raised the premiums of Medicare on seniors. Let me tell you what we're doing today. The Washington Republicans are taking a high-risk gamble. This is gambling. This is throwing the dice. Dean Heller, a senator, said, it is important that we extend the short term to get to the long term on payroll tax. Richard Lugar said we must do what is best for the American people. My voice may be a little raspy, but I am watching the trees and the lights in people's homes. As they go through the house, you can see those lights brightly shining. And then you get closer to that tree and you see them beginning to pop and burn as the Christmas tree burns. And then those who have lights in their homes, candles, you see them burning to the very end. It is extinguished. They're putting the American people in darkness. That's what this joke is doing. Not even allowing us to be able to have an up or down vote on the Senate bill that gives us 2 months to help our seniors have their doctors and to be able to have the reimbursement. I submit into the record the Rule Committee agenda. Can I have 15 seconds?
Sorry, I don't have more time.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Joke. Vote against this rule. Vote against it. I yield back.
Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Jeff Landry.
Gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to call out hypocrisy, because it is amazing that the same level of uncertainty that my colleagues from across the aisle have injected into our economy today, which is failing our economy, they now want to inject that type of uncertainty into the American family's budget. 2 months? One of the pillars of the President's jobs bill was the extension of the payroll tax for 1 year. And yet Republicans agreed with him and sent over to the Senate a bill which extends that payroll tax holiday for 1 year. And yet the Senate can only give us a sixth of that. Where is the compromise? Where is the agreement? Where has the Senate, the majority leader, and the President missed each other? The President wanted a 1-year extension, and that is what we stand for today, is a 1-year extension to the payroll tax holiday to give certainty to American families at a time when they need it the most. And I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from South Carolina, the Assistant Democrat Leader, Mr. Clyburn.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to thank the 89 senators, 50 Democrats, and 39 Republicans for their bipartisan agreement to extend the current payroll tax cut, unemployment insurance benefits, and Medicare doctors' payments for another 60 days while we continue to seek common ground for a full 12-month extension. Let there be no mistake. The only way for the members of this body to prevent a tax increase on 160 million working Americans is to pass the bipartisan agreement. Let me be crystal clear. The only way to prevent cutting off unemployment insurance from 2.2 million Americans who are currently unemployed and looking for work is to pass the bipartisan agreement. The only way to prevent cutting funds to pay doctors who care for Medicare patients is to pass the bipartisan agreement. Now, a good thing happened last weekend. The Senate Majority Leader and the Senate Minority Leader demonstrated to the American people that Democrats and Republicans can work together. They hammered out a compromise on this important legislation. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have heard their constituents ask, as I've heard mine ask time and time again, why can't you guys work together to get things done for the American people? It's a good question. It's a fair question. And the Senate has answered in the affirmative by passing this legislation, and it's my fervent hope that we will do so also. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to put partisanship aside and join our colleagues in the other body to do the right thing for the American people. Bring the bipartisan agreement to the floor, and let's have a vote. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from California, the great chairman of the Rules Committee, David Dreyer.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 4 minutes. Without objection. Gentleman's recognized.
Speaker, I thank my good friend from North Charleston for his superb management of this rule. Mr. Speaker, we regularly point to the fact that uncertainty is the enemy of prosperity and economic growth. And we know that extending this package for a year will, in fact, be doing exactly what President Obama has said is necessary for us to do. He said it's inexcusable for us not to extend this for a year, and so we've got a great chance to do this. The other issue that I think is important to note, Mr. Speaker, is that uncertainty is now posing a national security threat to the United States of America. And I say that because last night, Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada, had an interview on Canadian television in which he made it very clear that he'd been told that there would be approval of the Keystone XL pipeline that would have allowed for the flow of Canadian energy to come into the United States. And obviously, uncertainty exists, and so he made it very clear. He said he is very serious about selling that energy, moving that energy to Asia, and we know that that means to China. Now, I'm not an opponent of China's economic growth, but I do believe that the potential for us to work with our close ally to the north is a very, very important part of our economic growth. Job creation here would be enhanced by it, and we know it would help us have access to lower-cost energy. And so, Mr. Speaker, not only is uncertainty the enemy of economic growth and prosperity, but uncertainty is now jeopardizing our national security. Now, Mr. Speaker, some have tried to make the claim that we're not going to have an up or down vote on the Senate measure. Let me explain to our colleagues what, in fact, is going to happen. The distinguished chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means, Mr. Camp, is going to move to disagree with the Senate amendments and request a conference. That's the motion that the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee will have. What that means, Mr. Speaker, is that any member who believes that we should accept the Senate temporary 2-month extension, that proposal that according to the National Payroll Reporting Consortium has said is unworkable, and the Bloomberg News has said is unworkable, and other independent analyses have said is unworkable, if a member supports that measure, they should vote no to the motion that will be offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, which says, I move to disagree in the Senate amendments and request a conference. And so I think it's very clear we have a responsibility to do the people's business. It's true, our Senate colleagues have gone home. Our Senate colleagues have gone home, and they say they don't want to act. We need to request this conference so that the Speaker of the House can appoint conferees and work can begin immediately. Why is it that one would believe that creating this uncertainty and a temporary 2-month extension will allow us to get the work done next year? It needs to be done now. We have a December 31st deadline. We're going to see a tax increase go into effect if we don't act, because while the Senate measure provides a $166 tax benefit on the payroll issue, Ours would provide $1,000. Mr. Speaker, we need to make sure that we get this work done as quickly as possible, and we are here prepared to do it. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, a member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and my colleague from New York, Mr. Engel.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlewoman for yielding to me, and I rise in opposition to this rule. I have a challenge to my Republican colleagues who claim to want to extend the payroll tax for a year. Give us a clean vote on extending the payroll tax for a year. Give it to us today, and we will pass it. You talk about the bill that was passed in the House. That bill had poison pill in it. It mixed apples with oranges. It had a vote on the Keystone Pipeline. It was designed to kill it. If you're serious and you really want a middle-class tax extension, payroll tax cut, give us a clean vote. That's all we're asking for. The truth is that my friends on the other side of the aisle are interested in tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, but they're not interested in tax cuts for the middle class, as the Democrats are. So give us a clean bill, and then we'll call the Senate back to pass it. What the Senate has done is given us a two-month breather. Let's take their 2-month breather and then pass a clean doc fix, a clean extension of unemployment benefits, a clean payroll tax cut, not with any poison pills or extraneous material destined to kill it. Give us a clean bill and we'll pass it. I challenge my Republican colleagues who control this House.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close, so I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentlelady from New York.
If my colleague is prepared to close, I have one more speaker. I would like to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, our Democrat leader, Ms. Pelosi.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I thank her for her leadership in fighting the good fight at the Rules Committee. I commend her for her patience and also for her great knowledge that she brings to this debate. But this is a pretty simple matter. Fact is, what we're debating here today is of the utmost importance to the American people, to America's working families, and they know it. So much of what we debate on the floor may appear irrelevant to meeting their needs. This is has a direct connection. The debate that we have around our table of discussion here relates directly to the discussions that are happening at kitchen tables across the country as people prepare for the holidays, to see if they're going to be able to have a holiday and if they're going to be able to pay the bills come January. Last night, the leadership of the Republican Party announced that that the procedure today would be that we would be able to vote up or down on the Senate bill. In a matter of minutes, by the time it went to the Rules Committee, they changed that and said we wouldn't have a chance to vote up or down on the Senate bill. This isn't, though, about process. It's about why is this happening and why can't we get the job done for the American people. What is at stake is the following. Given the chance to have an up or down vote on the Senate bill, will probably attract some Republican support. When passed, it could go directly to the President, be signed into law today, removing all doubt in the minds of the American people as to whether the following will occur. They will get up to $1,500 tax cut for middle-income families, 160 million American workers will get the tax cut. It will mean 48 million seniors will have access to their doctors under Medicare. It will mean up to 2 million people will be receiving unemployment insurance in the next 2 months. For some of those people, losing that unemployment insurance cuts off any means of support for them. Is that what we are here to do? I thought we were here to do what the American people want us to do. What they have said they want us to do is to work together to get the job done. Why can't we work together? A. B, they want jobs. and they want this tax cut. Democrats, independents, Republicans want this tax cut. In fact, Republicans at 50-something to 30-something support the payroll tax cut. That is, Republicans across the country. Republicans in the Senate voted for this tax cut. 39 of them did. 90% of the Senate, in a bipartisan way, voted for this tax cut. It is just the extreme Tea Party element of the Republicans in the House of Representatives who are standing in the way of a tax cut for 160 million Americans, unemployment and benefits for millions of Americans, and Medicare opportunity for 48 million seniors. The Republicans say this is too short. It reminds me of a Yogi Berra story. He said, "I don't like the food at that restaurant. Besides, the servings are too small." Well, that's just what they're saying here. They've never wanted a tax cut. And now they're saying the tax cut for the middle-income people is too small. So what is it? The record shows that as recent as in the beginning of the summer, Speaker Boehner said, he said that the tax cut, even the one-year tax cut, was a short-term gimmick, and he opposed it. It wasn't until President Obama went across the country with the American Jobs Act to persuade the American people to support the job creation that he was advocating. One part of that was the payroll tax cut. American people overwhelmingly support that. They want us to get that job done. So the only reason the Republicans are using the subterfuge, these excuses, is because they never wanted the tax cut to begin with. Our distinguished Mr. Hoyer said it very well. The bill they put forth is designed to fail. Designed to fail because they didn't want it to begin with. But this is deadly serious to the American people. The Senate, just to see here where we are, the Senate Republicans opposed bringing up the House bill, the Republican House bill in the Senate, because they knew it would fail. The Republicans in the House, now let's repeat that, the Republicans in the Senate refused to allow a vote on the House Republican bill because they knew it would fail. The Republicans in the House refused to bring up the Senate bill here because they're afraid it will pass. And it will pass and give the tax cut, take us down a path where we can go forward to make plans for how we extend it for one solid year. But how do you explain this to the American people? 90% of the Senate has voted in a bipartisan way. That's what the American people want us to do, to work together for a tax cut that the American people want in overwhelming numbers, and that we have the opportunity to do right here and now, today. President Thomas Jefferson said very wisely that every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. And so let's see what this is today. Is this a difference of opinion of the path we can go down to have tax relief for the American people, which economists say this tax cut will create jobs? If we don't pass it, as many as 600,000 jobs can be affected, either lost or not continued or not added. 600,000 jobs because of the demand injected into the economy by putting money into the pockets of the American people, by providing unemployment benefits which are spent immediately and inject demand into the economy, therefore creating jobs. So this is dangerous business, because not only for how it impacts individual families and their survival, it's about the success of our economy, and not passing this bill today can hurt our economic recovery. So let's really be clear. Republicans said we were going to have a vote on the Senate bill. They're afraid it would win. They pulled that. So now we have to be engaged in these process maneuvers. That's only an excuse. It's not a reason to reject the tax cut. It's an excuse because they never wanted the tax cut from the beginning. So let's understand what we're here about. Getting back to President Jefferson, every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. But maybe here it is. Maybe the principle at stake here is the anti-government ideological warfare that the Tea Party Republicans in the extreme have taken us to. They alone are standing in the way of the tax cut for the middle class. Republicans across the country support it. Republicans in the Senate support it. Some Republicans in the Senate, in the House support it. That's why we're not getting a chance to vote on it. So let's understand that this is a pattern of the House Republicans isolating themselves from the mainstream of even their own party across the country and their colleagues in the Senate, who may or may not like this bill. It isn't the bill most of us would write, but that's what a compromise is. So it's not as if this is a mad, wild embrace of this. It's facing the reality of two-party system, needing 60 votes in the Senate and the Republican majority in the House. I thought the Speaker said that this was a victory after it passed in the Senate. He was the one who instructed Harry Reid, insisted that Senator Reid have the discussion with Mitch McConnell. Was that just a farce, too? Is this all just a delaying, stalling tactic that says we were never going to do it before? Remember Yogi Berra. I don't like the food at that restaurant, and the servings are too small. They don't like the tax cut, and now they're claiming that it is too small. When it was a one-year tax cut, it was called a gimmick by the Speaker of the House. So I urge my colleagues to certainly vote no on the rule that does not. The Speaker is proud of saying the House will work its will. Well, it won't if we don't have the opportunity under the rules of the House that are put on this floor in opposition to the wishes of the American people to take a simple vote on a bill that comes in with the strength of a 90% bipartisan vote in the Senate of the United States. So it's clear. They don't want a tax cut. They never wanted a tax cut. Anything they put forth is designed to fail because that is what they want to do. I tell my caucus, and I may be tired of hearing it from me, that it is like a gentleman who is wooing his potential fiancée and keeps asking her to marry him, to marry him, to marry him, and she says, "Of course I'll marry you. Of course I'll marry you. I can only do it on February 30th. Well, that day is never coming. Nor is the day coming when the Republicans will wholeheartedly support a tax cut for the middle class. Their focus has been on tax cuts for the wealthiest people in our country. And those wealthy people want a tax cut for the middle class. Let's do what the American people want. Let's vote no on this rule so that we have an opportunity to vote yes on the Senate bill that can be sent to the President this very day so that we can truly wish people a happy holiday season. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Does the gentleman from South Carolina continue to reserve?
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I am prepared to close. And I want to reiterate the way I started today, that what we're doing here is killing the tax cut by not voting anything here except that we do not concur with the Senate, and that we will hope some conference will come from someplace. That means there will be no tax cut. That means there will be no extension of unemployment benefits. Now, last night at 7 o'clock, when the Rules Committee was supposed to meet, the agenda called for a vote to concur into the Senate bill. But after the stormy 2-hour Tea Party conference, they reversed their course. And now we have a process where no tax cut can pass today, no matter who wins what vote. If every member of the House supported the bipartisan proposal, it still does not go to the President, and it does not become law. We have one chance, Mr. Speaker, of being able to vote on the Senate bill and one chance of winning that, and that will be on the previous question. Now, if we are able to defeat the previous question, we can have, which I will construe as an up or down vote on the Senate bill. I will ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment in the record. to vote on the previous question, but we want an up or down vote with the previous question. Let me repeat that because it's terribly important. I urge all my colleagues in the House, on both sides of the House, if you wish an up or down vote on what the Senate has done so that we can actually get some legislation done here and get it signed and sent by the President of the United States, you must vote no on the previous question so that we will have that opportunity, which we have absolutely been denied. Let me repeat again, what we're doing here is absolutely nothing. It is simply a stalling tactic, I believe, to kill the tax cut and to kill the unemployment benefits. So I urge my colleagues to vote no to defeat the previous question so we can do the compromise today. I urge a no vote and also on the rule, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt the American people are afraid. They're afraid of the party on the left. They're afraid because the party on the left raided $500 billion out of Medicare to pay for a national health care Ponzi scheme. They're afraid because that same party who talks about tax cuts for the middle class raised taxes by $500 billion on the middle class. And after being held hostage, the middle class now hears from the party on the left, trust me. Trust me with a 60-day extension. No planning time, no time to figure it out. Trust me after I raised taxes on you in the last 12 months by more than $500 billion. Mr. Speaker, regular order suggests for the last 200 years that when the House and the Senate, when they don't agree, they go to conference, so that the folks on the left and those fighting for freedom on the right have an opportunity to come together in a conference. So Mr. Waxman and Mr. Levin and others on the left who want a seat at the table, conference is the way you get a seat at the table. What we're asking for is common sense, something America has not seen from Congress in the last several years. Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to vote yes on the rule, yes on the underlying bill, and I yield back the balance of my time, and I move, Mr. Speaker, for the previous question on the resolution.
Gentleman yields back his time. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the Chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of adoption of the resolution. This is a 15-minute vote.
Live coverage of the House this morning with members continuing their debate over the tax cut extension. 2 votes right now, including procedural vote and a vote on the rule. And here's what we can expect as this debate evolves today. There are 4 key items today. Disagreeing with the Senate's language in their bill, a motion to go to conference with the Senate over what the House disagrees on, a vote to reaffirm the House's support for the original House payroll tax cut extension measure, and finally, a vote on a motion to instruct conferees that's offered by Democrats. Again, a procedural vote and a vote on the rule for debating a motion to conference on the tax cut bill. Now, this is 15 minutes. Assuming this is approved, the House will move on to debate the motion. The House, of course, preferring a 12-month extension of the bill, the Senate language calling for 2 months, with further work on that extension next year. So we are planning to open our phone lines during this first series of votes to get your take on what's been happening with the legislation over the past few weeks. The phone numbers for Republicans, 202-585-3885. For Democrats, 202-585-3886. And independents, it's 202-585-3887. We will get to your calls in just a couple of moments. But, of course, debate is not just over the tax cut extension. It also includes extending unemployment benefits, construction of the Keystone XL pipeline from Canada to Texas, and the Medicare dock fix. Before we get to your calls now, we spoke with a reporter on this morning's Washington Journal to recap last night's action in the House and how this is likely to play out in the coming hours.
Richard, so what will the House vote on today? When will these votes take place?
The House will vote. The chief proposal in the House from the House Republicans will be to request a conference committee with the Senate that would resolve the differences between the House and Senate versions, and the vote will occur by mid-afternoon. There'll be a series of votes along the way, but and there also will be a vote, an important vote on whether to on a sense of the Senate, a sense of the House, excuse me, sense of the House resolution to that states the Republican views on the payroll tax measure.
Why not vote on the Senate bill itself, as the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has called on them to do, an up or down vote?
Well, that was expected to be. That's what the Republicans had earlier said that they would permit such a vote, but they changed their mind and they said that they want to instead go to a conference committee to resolve the differences. They don't want to. They decided to not to go ahead with a direct vote on the Senate passed measure.
So how does this get resolved?
The way the House Republicans want it to be resolved is to have a conference committee, technically to have a conference committee between the House and Senate. I believe if it's going to be resolved, at this point what the House Republicans really want to have happen, we believe, is to have some kind of compromise, a deal, an agreement that would be reached between Speaker Boehner on behalf of the House and Senate Majority Leader Reid on behalf of the Senate, and that would happen. Perhaps that will happen in the next couple of weeks, either before the January 1 deadline or maybe even a little bit after January 1.
And is Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid in Washington? There was a report from Congressional Quarterly yesterday that he was seen with a suitcase and Christmas presents walking out of the Capitol.
We did report that, and he apparently he says he wants the he's not interested in any kind of negotiations. He wants the Senate. Senator Reid wants the House to vote on what the Senate passed, but that's not what Speaker Boehner wants. What he has in mind. So really, assuming the House passes today what the Republicans plan, the ball really is going to be back in Senator Reid's court as to what to do.
Richard Cohn, explain what we heard from Speaker Boehner, that a payroll consortium group came out saying a 2-month extension is complicated.
This is obviously this is a business group that said that it would be difficult to change for many companies, either small businesses or others, that it would be complicated to change their payroll records or their payroll procedures to do it on a 2-month basis. So therefore, the Republicans are saying they want to extend to the payroll tax cut for a full year, and to do it on according to the plan that the House passed earlier.
We will be ending the Washington Journal early this morning at 9 a.m. The House is coming in early. Richard Cohn, what will you be looking for when the floor debate begins?
The chief question is whether the Republicans remain unified. If they do, if they are, they'll be able to pass Speaker Boehner's plan. If not, who knows what will happen. But frankly, the Republicans say that they will have enough votes to send the bill to conference committee, and then who knows what happens after today. But the chief question today is, are the Republicans unified behind the plan to go to conference committee?
And what are you hearing? Because we've a lot of focus on the Tea Party faction of the House Republicans, but there are some, longtime Republicans who've been around who are not so sure about this game plan?
Well, at this point, frankly, they don't really have. Assuming the House agrees to the plan that was put together, that will come from the Rules Committee, and that almost usually the majority party, members of the majority party do go along with whatever comes out of the Rules Committee, then there simply will not be the Democrats, what the Democrats want, they will not have the opportunity to vote for. Namely, there will not be a vote. The Republican plan is to not have a vote today on what the Senate passed last Saturday.
Yeah, and real quickly before we let you go here, we heard leading into the Washington Journal this morning, we re-aired the Rules Committee meeting from last night, and Alcee Hastings, a Democrat on that panel, was saying the Senate's gone. You know, these senators are all over the world, he said. So explain the logistics of getting the Senate back to vote on any sort of negotiations between the House and the Senate.
Well, the House came back from after being away for a couple of days, and frankly, it's not clear that the Senate would actually, that you would need to have all 100 or even 60, sometimes it takes 60 senators or 51 senators to do something. You might not even need more than a few senators to simply to accept what to respond to the House, perhaps by agreeing. They could do it by voice vote to go to a conference committee. But what I really believe what would happen, I think what Speaker Boehner is looking for is to have informal discussions with Senator Reid, and that would not require any senators to appear on the floor unless and until an agreement is reached and there'll be a final approval. So the question at this point, I think, frankly, is not so much what the Senate would do, what would happen on the Senate floor. The question is really more whether Senator Reid or other senior Democrats are willing to go along with the plan that the House expects to pass today.
Okay.
And then there'll be an informal discussion between the two chambers.
All right, Richard Cohen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Richard Cohen spoke with us this morning on Washington Journal. Again, a couple of votes underway in the House now, a procedural vote and a vote on the rule for debating a motion to conference on the tax cut bill. Now to your phone calls. Here are the numbers: 202-585-3885 for Republicans. Democrats call in on 202-585-3886. Independents, your number is 202-585-3887. And we have a special welcome to those of you listening to C-SPAN Radio and online. First up is Jan from Mesa, Arizona. Your thoughts on the tax cut debate? She's calling in on the Republicans line.
Yes, thank you for taking my call, and I wish everybody a Merry Christmas. This is really sad. Isn't it sad that all of Republicans and Democrats on both sides, all they worry about is them, their vacation. The president wants to go on a vacation. His family's off on a vacation. What, 20 million people are out of work, 25 million? And this is all they can think about is their vacation. The rest of us haven't had vacations in years. I could give a flip if Republicans or Democrats get a vacation. And you know, a 2-month I have a small business. We're trying to do everything we can keep our doors open. We don't have the money for all this big changing all these laws constantly. This is what they don't get. That's the problem with the president. He should have been involved. He isn't a leader, and he has all this time off. His family's gone. He has nothing planned today. You know, come on, America. Republicans and Democrats, don't blame it on one or the other. It's just like usually you pass a bill and it goes to the other, and then you get a committee together on both sides. Well, Harry Reid doesn't want to do it. Harry Reid's had how long? The Republicans have only had this for, what, 10 months? They've been in charge of the House. Nancy Pelosi's out there with all of her grandiose ideas and her thing. Well, Nancy, I have no respect for you after all the money you made on inside trading.
We want to get to as many calls as possible. Next to Ryan on the Democrats line, Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Yes, good morning and Merry Christmas, and thanks for taking my call. What disappoints me as a Democrat is the cockiness of the Senate, them leaving town, and, you know, they knew that they were going to not pass the House bill, the original bill, and it was going to go back to the House, but they just made an assumption that the House was going to go ahead and pass the exact same bill that the Senate did, that they got 90%, and the Senate's gone now. So if they're not in accord, what's going to happen? And what upsets me is that any time the House and the Senate don't agree, you're supposed to go to committee. And I believe a representative said the past 200 years, you go to committee and you fix the problem and you go to conference. And that's not what's happening. And what ticks me off is what happened with the Senate. You know, they had the cockiness to just leave, and now we're stuck with this bill. And I just hope that we could pass it. Obama wanted a one-year extension. The Republicans passed a one-year extension, but now the Democrats want a two-month extension, and that's not going to work. A 2-month extension is very complicated, like the last speaker has said. So I just hope that we can go ahead and get the business done, and the Senate needs to come back, and they need to do the people's work. Obama needs to sign it, and that needs to be the end of it.
Thank you. Independent line, James in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Well, good morning, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. Let me identify myself. I'm a retiree of the U.S. military. I spent 9 years in the Marine Corps and the balance of 16 years in the Army. When America responded to the threat of communism in Korea and sent troops over there, I was one of the ones that volunteered, and I served in a combat situation. I just wanted to let you know I love America, and that's who I am, and that's where I come from. Now, I have regrets about having spent my career in the military because I might have made a good congressman. And if I were allowed to serve in Congress at this particular time, I think I have an answer to break the gridlock that's taking place between the Senate and the House of Representatives.
What would you do?
Well, right now it seems that the Republicans have put forth a bill which includes the pipeline with Alaska, and that has a lot of merits to it. I can see the merit of doing something like that. I'm told that the president is against that because the environmentalist vote, which is a block of voters that he counts on for re-election, would oppose that. And he doesn't want to lose their favor, so he's putting it off till after the election, the pipeline aspect of the bill. Now, the Republicans have long time opposed the taxing of the rich, but I think most Americans are in favor of taxing the rich because it just makes common sense that if you live in a country that you derive more benefits than the average person, then you should be able to pay a higher tax for those benefits that you've derived. That just makes good sense.
Okay, so
and
your resolution then would be?
Well, I think the Republicans have been holding back on allowing this to get forth in any bill, but I think they're using that as a trump card. Now, if the Democratic Congress, Senate, I should specify the Senate, wanted to accept the bill that the Republicans put forth, they could have done so by stipulating, yes, we'll accept that, but we'll put an amendment on it which says tax the rich. And you know what? I think the Republicans would have caved in on that because they would have gotten what they wanted, the Democrats would have gotten they wanted, and for heaven's sakes, the American people would have benefited all the way around on both issues.
Thanks, James. Appreciate your call. Next to Republican line, and Lewis, who's in Middletown, New Jersey.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I'm currently unemployed. I've been unemployed for about a year and a half. I sit here and I'm listening to both the Republicans and the Democrats throw blame back and forth to each other. I worked in an industry, textile industry, that A long time ago, this country decided to give up because they felt like it wasn't worthy of saving, because they felt that labor overseas would benefit this country in the long term. And all it's really done is sat there and allowed other countries to make things, and their economies are thriving while we're sitting here and we can't make anything anymore. And now I sit here and I watch both the Republicans and the Democrats just sit up here with the audacity as if they didn't know that this day was coming, and they're just throwing blame back and nobody seems to be addressing anything. This has been sitting here for months, and how they can sit here and now and say, well, we want it for 2 months or we want it for a year. It is an absolute joke that the people who they are supposed to be representing, who are being hurt, and all they are doing is just throwing blame back and forth at each other rather than addressing what this country needs. This country needs to get back to what it made this country great. Building things for ourselves, doing things for ourselves, and not relying on other countries and other places to do everything for us. Because don't we realize all we're doing is falling prey to the other countries around the world, and whatever they decide, we just fall prey to because we can't make anything or do anything ourselves?
Lewis expressing some frustration on the Republicans' line. To the Democrats' line now, Christina in Attleboro, Massachusetts.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. The thing I want to say is I agree with a lot of the callers. It's both sides. It is. But one thing I can't see is the Democrats, especially in the Senate. They say that we have a do-nothing Congress, but the Senate is the one that's holding up everything. It tables everything. And I'm getting sick of it. We're just at a stalemate. And this 2-month extension, we don't live 2 months, but they want us to live check to check. And we can't be doing this. How can we make plans for retirement if we live a check to check or 2 months to 2 months on their laws? You know, this is why I believe that it should be term limits, because they need to know how their laws affect us. And if they have to live with the laws themselves, then they'll know what their laws are doing to us. It's ridiculous. Like the man said, we don't even have any jobs here anymore. It is ridiculous. We need to bring back all the jobs that were here. A lot of the jobs, Americans can do all of these jobs. I don't know why we don't bring them back here. It's just ridiculous. And I do thank you for letting me speak.
To the other side of the country, Terry in Olympia, Washington, is calling on the Independence line.
Hi, good morning. I guess I'm kind of reiterating a little bit of what was heard, not some new things. I guess I don't understand how I'm sitting here looking at the screen and I see that 207 people are unsure about whether or not I will have a home next month. I'm unemployed. I have not gotten a single extension on my unemployment. I haven't been unemployed long, and I have over $100,000 student loan bill and no job because of the cuts that were made to the mental health system in our country. You know, I'm looking at it, and I hear about people wanting to go for their Christmases when I'm sitting here looking at my tree and not knowing if I'm even going to have a home next month. My unemployment runs out next month, and nothing is certain that I will have an income. And I have no family. I'm by myself. And I'm looking at the screen seeing that the people that are supposed to be representing me, they don't seem to care about that. And it's deeply hurtful in a country that I grew up in, believing that it was about the people, and it just doesn't seem to be like that anymore. And it's very distressing.
Of course, extending unemployment benefits is a part of this debate also, along with construction of the Keystone XL pipeline and the Medicare doc fix, also a part of this legislation. We're continuing to take your calls on extending the payroll tax cut. 202-585-3885 for Republicans. Democrats, your number 202-585-3886. Independents, your number to call 202-585-3887. Next to Kelly in Miami. Kelly calling on the Republicans line. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. You know, I voted Republican since 1980, since I was eligible to vote. I'll be 50 here this year. And I am so disappointed right now in my party and the way they've been obstructing for the last 2 years here. Now, I was reading today some writings from one of our vice presidents, Henry A. Wallace, and this seemed to be so accurate with where my party is at right now. They seem to have become the party of autocrats and corporatists, and not a party of the people. And I'll quote him. They claim to be super patriots, but they would destroy every liberty guaranteed by the Constitution. They demand free enterprise, but are the spokesmen for monopoly and vested interest. Their final objective, toward which all their deceit is directed, is to capture political power so that, using the power of the state and the power of the market simultaneously, they may keep the common man in eternal subjection. Now, I just really am frightened for the way this country's going, and it seems like we're headed down the road to where business and the government are going to become one, and we're going to have a fascist police state. And I'm very concerned, and I probably will not be voting Republican again until I see this change.
And we appreciate your call. Thanks for all of the calls coming in. Again, a couple of votes in the House right now, wrapping up a procedural vote. And up next, we expect a vote on the rule for debating this motion to conference on the tax cut bill. That is expected to be a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 233, the nays are 187, with one present. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes.